Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading to some particularly horrifying haunted houses for an exclusive tour. Be sure to follow me on Twitter before we enter though. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I grew up in North Texas, and one of my friends has a cow farm and a lot of land. The name of the street he lived on was his family name. Me and my friends would go out there a lot on weekends, way out on the land far from his house, bring a guitar and some weed, and make a campfire and just hang out. One summer night, my friend asked if we wanted to see a haunted house. He said it wasn't really haunted per se, but it was out in the middle of nowhere, and was abandoned. He said he'd driven by it a few times on farm routes, but had never had the stones to go explore it himself, especially not at night. It was one of those times where no one wanted to be the first to say no, so we all said yes. It was a cool, clear night, and we piled into my friend's sedan. We were listening to some good old classic rock tunes and generally enjoying ourselves. We came to an area where we had to drive over a very old river, which was now a narrow stream. This stream had eroded this patch of land for so long that it had become a very, very steep depression. There was a large plank of wood across the remainder of the stream, making it flat enough to drive across. Our friend assured us it was safe for the car, even though it looked like the angle was too steep for the car to cross without being damaged. By this point, the atmosphere had changed. We were no longer just hanging out all fancy-free. A few of us were speaking because we were just looking at the windows at the dark and the looming trees and expanse of moonlit grass. We held our breaths as we crossed the stream, and when we crossed it, there was a sea change in the way it felt. It was as if I could sense the house getting closer. No one had said a word for the past 10 minutes, other than my friend giving us time estimates on how much further we were from it. There was nothing out here, not even a paved road. There was a dirt road formed from cars, but it was very old and overgrown, as if it had not been used except, perhaps, sparingly for a decade. Suddenly I became aware of something that had been present for a good portion of the trip, but had occurred so slowly that I hardly noticed. I broke the silence. Everything's in black and white. Everyone else in the car started to freak out, because they could only see black and white too. There was no color anywhere, just shades of black like an old photo. "Are we dead?" I asked. I was convinced we had died along the way, but had not been aware that we were dead, like in a horror movie. I still had no explanation for this. We pulled up to the house and the color had returned, it seemed, but it was too dark that it didn't matter anyway. The house was 2 stories at a slight tilt, and the face of the house looked menacingly down at us. It was an old southern house with white pillars that had become discolored with age, a faux balcony jutting out from under the 2nd-story window, and about 50 meters from the house was a large metallic silo. As the headlights from our car washed over the area, the darkness took its time to leave because it had become so settled there. We began walking slowly towards the house. In the front yard there were lots of holes in the ground, freshly dug, about the size to fit a small potted plant. Inside the holes we found crumpled up pieces of paper. On the paper were crude drawings, like children's drawings. They were of people. Stick figures. Some of the stick figures would be upside down or laying down. Some of them had faces, and they were all sad or yelling about something. We went into the silo, which was unlocked. We went in with a flashlight and lit up the interior portion by portion with a beam from the flashlight. It was totally empty and gleamed like polished chrome. It smelled like sawdust and old oats. I swore I heard the sound of a girl crying, but that might have just been the sound of the hinges on the door. I'll keep telling myself that. Finally, we went to the house. The doors were all broken off the hinges. There was a screen door, and it was partially torn. We went inside. We broke up into groups and tried to explore the whole thing. We were all trying to seem brave, saying things like, "The thing I'm most afraid of is the floor falling in." There were closets, and we'd hold our breath before we'd open the doors, but found nothing inside. The whole house was completely dark and empty. We only had one flashlight, so there might have been parts that we had missed, but we wanted to get the hell out of there. We got back in the car, and one of my friends dared someone to go into the house by himself and sit on the living room and close his eyes for 30 seconds. He said he would do it. I couldn't believe it. I could never do it. He walked off proudly towards the house. We saw him go in. The living room was the first room on the first floor past the foyer beyond the door. Several minutes passed and we thought he was messing with us, wanting one of us to go in after him so that he could give them a scare. Well, that's when we noticed the smell. Something smelled really awful in the car. My friend, who was driving, looked down and saw a dead cat crammed down underneath the pedals. Then we noticed there was cat fur strewn about the car. We freaked out and started honking the horn and flashing the headlights at the house. Our friend didn't come out. Finally, me and another friend went in after him. When he got to the living room, we found him sitting on the floor, huddled over, his back to the wall, with his arms wrapped around his knees and his head buried in his legs. He looked up at us as if we should run away, as if it was too late. We told him to get his ass so that we could get out of there, and he pointed to the wall behind us. The lights from the car were still flashing, trying to get us to leave. Each time the lights flashed, we could see it. All of our names were written on the wall in red. Later that summer, a friend of mine went back to the house during the day and burnt it down. I work at the Winchester Mystery House, and one late afternoon, I was up on the 3rd floor cleaning some windows. It was about 4:45 to 5, and by this time the last tour had already passed through my area, so I was alone, completely alone, in the chilling silence of the most haunted floor of the house. Nothing'd happened at this time, but I was feeling uncomfortable to say the least, as I'd only been working there a few months. So this was the most time I'd spent up there alone after this experience, and I vowed to never go up there by myself again. Here's the rest of the story. I was finishing up the last few windows in the room that I was in because I looked down at my watch and it was approaching my clock out time. Now, as I mentioned, no one was up there. As if someone had been, they've been lying to me for over 2 years about this day. I started to head out the room where I was cleaning, and looked around to check just in case someone was waiting to jump out and scare me, but there was no one there. I began to head down the hallway, looking in the room that we call the South Turret, Witch's Cap. I then get a chill that rolls down my spine, and the feeling was that of one of not being alone. Someone was watching me from the shadows that started to dance in the dimly lit hallway. I stopped, then turned around just to check, and of course nothing was there. I brush it off as just nerves since I was alone up there for the first time. As I take my first step, I hear it, a small whisper coming from the end of the hallway in the area I had just come from. I stop dead in my tracks and hold my breath to hear. Then I hear it again. Someone was calling my name from what I believe was the South Turret Witch's Cap. I sometimes still hear it in the back of my mind, and it terrifies me, and I ran out, almost trampling a co-worker coming up the stairs. Since that day, whenever I'm up there, something's bound to happen to me. Whether it's a small tug of my hair or a pull of my skirt, or simply just a feeling. Whatever's up on the 3rd floor is very interested in me, and I've been there for over 2 years and never heard the voice again. But I'll never forget that moment of pure and utter fear. There have been reports of a woman wearing a black gown pacing the hallway or twirling around in the witch's cap. I've never seen her, but I'm dead set that she was calling to me. My family and I had just moved to Council Grove, Kansas from Greenville, South Carolina. We went from the beaches and mountains to the flatlands of Kansas. My grandparents had searched there for houses for us prior to moving, as there were 8 of us, not including my dad and stepmom. They found an old farmhouse that was built in 1872, and it came with a 3-room chicken coop, 3 outdoor sheds, 2 garages, an old train car, and 2 metal barns. To get a better understanding of the layout of my story, I will give you a description of the house. When you first enter the house, you could go straight down a set of 5 steps to the dirt-floored cellar, or go up the set of 3 steps to the closed-in back porch that led to the back door entrance of the house. Once you walked in the back door, it took you directly into the kitchen. Now the kitchen had a room entrance on either side, one to the living room and the other to the pantry, leading you into a bathroom. From the living room, there was the formal dining room off to the left, which had a bedroom off the side of it. Also off the living room was a doorway that led into a hallway with a set of stairs to a landing with another set of stairs leading to the second level of the house. Now through the doorway of the living room there was also a closet off to the side of the stairs, under the second set of stairs, and on the other side of the stairs is an entrance into our bathroom with the connecting door to the pantry. Going up the stairs past the first landing and up the next set lands you on the second floor hallway. There were rooms on both sides of it, 2 rooms directly in front of the top of the stairs and 1 directly to the right of the stairs. Of course, my parents took the bottom downstairs off the side of the formal dining room, and all of us kids were put in bedrooms upstairs. The 2 elder boys got their own rooms at each end of the hallway. My sisters and I were put in one of the rooms directly in front of the stairs, and my other 2 brothers were put in the room right next to us, which was also one of the rooms in front of the stairs, and they had decided to use the bedroom directly to the right of the stairs as storage for our Christmas decorations, clothing that didn't fit us but would be reworn by a sibling who may fit it later. We were so excited and happy to have all of this space as we literally had moved from a 3-bedroom house to a 6-bedroom one. We were there for almost a month and had decided to pursue the ranching lifestyle. We invested in cows, bulls, chickens, roosters, rabbits and goats, and we also had gotten 2 dogs, a blue heeler and a red heeler on top of the 2 German shepherds we already had. Every day my siblings and I had animal chores to do, and we gathered a routine for them as well. It was the end of summer and school was going to begin within a week, so we were all staying out later and playing as it was a full moon that night. We decided to play hide and seek by using only the light provided by the moon. Now, seeing as our entire property was surrounded with pastures that held our livestock and corn, everything was lit up very well. On the one side of our house, there were some trees and all our hutches where we housed our livestock rabbits. I had gone to hide in a lower branched tree, where once comfortably perched in the branches. I looked out over the yard for the one who was it, and I waited there for what seemed like forever, and I finally saw who I had thought were 2 of my brothers walking from the chicken coop up to the back porch door, and they entered. I just remember being so mad because I had climbed up in this tree and had patiently waited to be found. And there they went, just leaving us all outside without telling us. I pumped down from the branch and started walking towards the back porch door to go yell at them for not telling us it was over, when my siblings all yelled at me for giving away the game as I came out from my hiding spot. Now I was about 9 years old at the time, so in my high-pitched annoying voice I screamed, "That's not fair." The only reason I came in from the hiding spot was because I swore I had seen Justin and Andrew walking inside. As Justin and Andrew came out from the outdoor shed, saying that there was no way that was even possible, as they were in there the entire time. After that we looked at each other and darted for the back porch door and trampled over each other to get in. Once inside, we all piled in a line outside the bathroom off the kitchen, where we all took our turns going pee and washing up before all heading upstairs to go to bed before our parents woke up. None of us spoke about it again after that. Now it is winter time, and I am out feeding my calf Burger. I know, kinda twisted, but whatever. Now, as I was out giving him his feed, I heard what sounded like an older woman who was in her late 40s/early 50s, rambling on about how the cost of wheat had dropped and how he was supposed to feed his animals through the rest of the season. Mind you, my brothers were less than a football field's lengths away from where I was, but they were feeding the chickens and collecting their eggs. So at the time I'm starting to panic, just a little bit, and stupid me with a cracked voice hollers out, "Hello, is anyone there? I think you should come out, this is private property." My first thought was that my 2 older brothers had just gotten a 12-gauge shotgun for Christmas, and the bullets were under their beds in case something broke loose. My second thought was to let Daisy, our German Shepherd, in the pen that was opened by the barn where I had heard this man talking frantically. At this point a few minutes had gone by, and I turned towards my brother and waved him over to where I was, and once he came over to me, I explained to him what I had heard, and what I had said. He stood there and waited for a few more minutes, and there it was again, the damn old man's voice screaming at this point, "This is my farm, my land, and you can leave before I come out." My brother and I's eyes met so fast we silently came to the agreement to beeline it to the back porch door, screaming for our other siblings to do the same as our parents weren't home. We all gathered in a circle in the living room on the floor, frantically explaining to everyone what just happened out in the barn. We debated telling our parents, mind you. Our dad was a very, very verbally and physically abusive guy who truly hated his kids and made it well known to all of us. And our stepmom, well, she liked to agonize and abuse us, so we ultimately decided to just act like nothing had ever happened. We began sharing chores with each other almost immediately after the event. Summer had finally arrived. The only reason this date stuck out so clearly to me was as it was my 10th birthday, June 2nd, 2001. It was a rather hot day, and my brother and I had walked out into one of the pastures back to a creek that ran through our entire property to catch frogs and swim a bit. My brothers had wandered upstream a little ahead of us, and I was too entertained by a bright yellow, orange, white butterfly that was fluttering around me as I was swimming. I heard Andrew holler out for me and say that Dad was going to be home soon, so we better get back to the house and finish our chores. Now, thinking about it, it definitely did not make any sense. We had left the house right after lunch. On the way back out the back door through the kitchen hung a clock featuring some apples, and it read about 12:03 p.m. The walk from the house to the creek was only about 10 minutes, and we had only been in the water not even 20. My dad worked till about 6 or 7 on a normal night, as he was a carpenter. Our stepmom was back in the house caring for our 9-month-old baby sister and 4-year-old baby brother, as she only worked in the early mornings at the local bakery in Council Grove. So without fail I listened and grabbed my shoes and wandered back down to the water to throw on my flip-flops, only to see my brother walking back over to me asking where I thought I was going. I stopped and shook my head, and kinda just assumed they were messing with me at this point. Mind you, we didn't have cell phones, nor did either of my parents, so here we are, 4 of us, because the other 4 stayed home, no phones, and just us with our towels. I wasn't about to stay down in this creek and have them try and scare me, so I began walking back towards the house. Mind you, I watched my brothers walk further down the creek as I was going in the opposite direction. While walking back through the tree brush, I saw what appeared to be 2 kids, a boy and a girl, roughly between 7 or 8 and 13 and 14. I blinked and rubbed my eyes and looked back, but this time they had moved a solid football field's length away from where I had seen them the first time. At this point, adrenaline had completely kicked into high gear, because before I knew it, I was halfway across our pasture, climbing over the little cattle gate and running across my driveway, not thinking twice about looking back. The weirdest part is when I got back up to the house, all of my siblings were somehow there. Literally, how is this even possible? They walked down there without me. I watched them go in the opposite way, and I walked back to the house. All I know is I went to the bathroom, got in the shower where I began sobbing, and had no idea what just happened. If this was all some kind of elaborate prank, they succeeded. but I don't think it was. My stepmom had told everyone to get cleaned up for dinner at this point, and I am completely on edge. I walked into the kitchen, sat down at the table to eat dinner, and after dinner I had to go do the dishes, clean the kitchen before I went to bed, and I immediately cleaned up after dinner to head to my room. Side note, my closet in my room had a hobbit door with a very long but very narrow storage space that we never used. My stepsister and I had a shared bedroom, and we had bunk beds. I was of course in the top bunk, lying down with the blanket over my head, trying to figure out exactly what had happened that day. But I kept drawing blanks, and was just left with more questions than answers. As I lay there, stumped, scared and confused, I somehow managed to fall asleep, and remember hearing my stepsister come into the room, as she was a very loud and heavy walker. I remember her leaving our bedroom door open, and shut off our light and crawled into her bed, and heard her snoring shortly after as I fell asleep too. Ashley, open your window. Ashley, please won't you let me in? Come on, I won't hurt you. Please open and let me in, is what I heard, as my eyes shot wide open, and I could feel my heartbeat all the way to my toes. Absolutely terrified at this point, I threw the blankets over my head and closed my eyes so tight, hoping it would go away and that I was only dreaming. After a few minutes, nothing, so I started to relax a little bit and started to chuckle as I was about to finally breathe, and I thought to myself that I was just paranoid from the situation from down at the creek. I was able to finally go back to sleep after what felt like hours, but had to have only been 20 minutes. I woke up to the sound of the door that led you to the stairs from the living room open and close, followed with footsteps walking up the first 2 flights of stairs, then stopping and pausing when reaching the landing in between the 2 sets of stairs leading to the second floor. I remember hearing someone whispering, but couldn't make out who it was or what they were saying. Then I hear the footsteps continue up the second set of stairs all the way to the top. My body was frozen in sheer terror. It was almost as if this entire day and night was just one big nightmare, but it definitely wasn't. I threw my blanket over my face, but left my ears and the top of my head uncovered as I was trying to listen for who or what it was who I had heard walk up my stairs. I heard what sounded like 3 or more people walking up and down our hallway whispering to each other. Then I heard a little girl running up and down the hallway, entering my room laughing and running back to the hallway. This continued on for a while, and then I heard them all walk from the end of the hallway to my doorway, where I was finally able to make out what one said to the rest. "We have one awake with us, in here." I wanted to crap myself at this point, as I heard them all slowly walk from my doorway to where I literally could feel their presence surrounding my bed. My eyes squeezed shut so tight, I was not trying to see face to face with whoever was in my room. They were there for what felt like an eternity, mumbling after that, until I heard a girl's voice announce that he is in. I am thinking so many thoughts right now, but the one that stuck out the most was this cannot be real. I heard the footsteps retreating back to the hallway and everything fell silent. I waited a few more minutes before uncovering my face and breathing a sigh of relief, and that scared the crap out of me. I closed my eyes and tried to get more sleep. I rolled over and cracked my eye open and I heard, "Ashley, I got inside after all, and you didn't even help me." At this point it must have been between 5 and 6 a.m. The sky outside was starting to lighten. I made out this dark, tall and very broad figure staring right at me, with what appeared to be dark circles as eyes. Now again it's still dark with a hint of light in my bedroom. I closed my eyes and felt like someone had put me in a freezer. As fast as it happened, it was over. I was no longer cold and I opened my eyes to find nothing in my doorway, but heard my hobbit door in my closet slam closed. After that night I never slept without a light on. I never went back down to that creek unless it was to search for any missing or lost cattle. My siblings and I moved in with our grandparents a few short months after school had picked back up, due to all of the physical abuse we were enduring at the hands of my dad. Later on in life, we had gotten together over dinner and drinks, and I had brought it up, and my brother looked so shocked when I told him what happened to me on my birthday that year, and about that night playing hide and seek in the moonlight. He then told me he had watched our younger brother and I walk from the chicken coop to the house, but when he saw me come out of the tree, he realized it wasn't, and decided to act tough considering he's my older brother. He also went on to tell me about how he had always heard what sounded like strangers in our home every night since we first moved in. We never went back to the property once we left. Good riddance. I used to work in a haunted courthouse. It was built in the 1920s. The 4th floor was our first jail. A man tried to escape to the roofing after doing some digging and fell to his death from the roof. He straddled a heat/air pipe and chiseled his way to the roof, and I feel that he's the ghost that lingers around this place. The 4th floor is extremely large. The courthouse is a crowded space, however we do not use the 4th floor for anything for the public, and the clerks that go up there are usually only up for a max of 30 minutes. Their records only take up about 1/20th of the real space available, when, as a courthouse, we are lacking space. I am new to this county. They have a tradition of always shutting and locking the old, solitary confinement box that still has padded walls, the only cell left, not destroyed and I'm not sure why. I was allowed up by a clerk based off my curiosity. I asked why lock it, when all it has is used paint cans, and they said it's safest to. I went up with a county clerk who informed me until recently all the 4th floor was cells. Then they put in drywall and doors at the entrances. Note, to access the 4th floor itself is behind 2 heavily padlocked doors from both sides. She warned me after I was trying all the doors, being the tourist that I am, that I should not touch the far left door. When I asked why, she said once she was up there, and she heard heavy scratching from the other side and breathing, like someone was still trying to dig through the door. She told me she got another clerk still employed, and she brought it up and they both heard it. That no one likes to be up there for longer than half an hour. No one can access the room without a key, as both sides require it. Later that day, as I'm an attorney, I told District Court, which are separate offices, of the tour, and they told me that it was interesting and asked if I felt okay. I asked why, and the clerk then shared with me that she hired a woman to transfer the paper to electronic, and she had an issue up there. I asked what. She said she was up there working when she heard and saw the far left door handle being violently tried to open, which is both locked on both sides, and the door banging. The clerk went up to the 4th floor with her, and she was explaining that it was in her imagination and nothing was wrong. She was just imagining things due to the hours in a windowless room and peopleless level. That is when the door started banging harder, and the door handle started to open even more. They both fled. She did not know the door I knew. I did not know about the incident reported, but both the same door. There are a lot more stories, but at this point, I don't want a demon or ghost to attach itself to me. I now understand why I ask for an old file from the 4th floor. They look at me as if I'd just punched them. The clerk of District County reported to me when she was at the county attorney's head secretary before that they installed the double doors and always locked the solitary confinement. She and others used to see things late at night when she would come up to type up warrants. It seems our county has contained the issue. Maybe nothing, maybe something. I won't go back there for $1 million. I felt a little awkward and excited when I was up there. I'm an urban explorer and have been in sewer tunnels, etc., and really felt weirded out. They put up drywall around a bunch of old cells and added doors to the cells. I didn't know that when I was trying all the doors, before I got to the door far on the left, and the clerk told me not to touch it. When I was 6, my sister and my mother were all laying on my mum's bed, as my dad was away for work. We were watching a movie on the TV in the bedroom. My sister and mother were asleep, and I had just started dozing off when I heard the cat in the kitchen hissing, then running down the hallway. As soon as we got into the room, our dog, a very large, brindled boxer, jumped out of bed and went straight to the door and started growling down the hallway. And it's a very long hallway with 20-foot ceilings. This woke both my mum and sister up. My mum kept telling the dog to be quiet when she heard the candle slide across the counter in the kitchen and shattered to the floor. My mum sat straight up and my sister and I laid there frozen in fear. My mum got up and went to the door. The dog was right next to her, hair standing up. Then the kitchen faucet was turned on full blast. My mum was terrified and so were we. She hit the light switch in the hallway and walked out about halfway down. My sister and I jumped out of bed and clung behind her. When we get to the kitchen, the light was on, water was running and the handle was sitting on the counter perfectly fine. No doors were unlocked, and we went through the entire house making sure nothing was out of place or anyone there. We can all recall this memory very vividly. So many creepy and scary things happened in that house. That's just one. We were there from 96 to 01 and ended up moving due to horribly bad luck and fear of any of us being alone. This story happened when I was around 11 years old, perhaps a little older. I had just moved into the room upstairs where my older sister used to live. I always read Donald Duck on the bed before going to sleep. One night I was reading and really had to pee. I left the Donald Duck magazine on my bed open with the pages down, as to know where I had it. I hadn't heard of a thing called bookmarks back then. So I went downstairs to do my business, and when I came back up the magazine was gone and nowhere to be seen. I checked under the bed, in my nightstand, nothing. It was pretty late and everyone else was asleep, as I was quite the night owl already back then, and I said screw it and just went to bed. The next morning when I went to the bathroom, the magazine was laying on a chest of drawers next to the toilet, open with the pages down. The thing is, my sister experienced a lot of weird stuff in that room. The volume on her sound system turning up and down, the sound system suddenly turning on the highest volume, CDs falling out of the shelves, and she never got a good night's sleep in that room ever. Neither did I, which is probably why I became a night owl now that I think about it. I also had just gotten a guitar for Christmas when I moved into that room. Could not play it well yet. My parents were divorced and one weekend I was at my mum's house. Didn't bring my guitar as I didn't want to ruin it anyway. That weekend my dad and my stepmom were laying in bed as their room was next to mine when they heard guitar coming from my room. Like good guitar playing. They listened to it for a while until it stopped. It never happened again. No one else was in that house at the time either, as my younger sister and I always spent the weekends at each other's parents', and she was like 8 and my brother had moved out by then. A few years ago I moved from South Carolina to Georgia for family reasons to live with my cousin Ethan. The house had belonged to our grandmother my entire life, and I was very familiar with the place. The house was a 3-story townhome. If you don't know what a townhome is, it's a very thin house, but it's very tall and almost always connected to other townhomes, like a bunch of dominoes side by side. Or if you live in England, a terrace house. Ever since I was younger, I remember loving the home during the day. But at night, the eerie feeling of the home changed. The once well-lit stairwell became impossible to see through, and the open window showed only darkness. It was also deathly silent. You almost never heard the neighbors, and while that might not sound like a good thing, it made you feel like you were the only person around for miles. While the house was creepy, I had never experienced anything remotely paranormal. Things had been relatively calm until 1 month after I had moved in permanently. Since the house was so eerie, my cousin and I usually elected to share a room. It felt more comfortable that we could have conversations until we fell asleep. One night we went to bed late, around 3 a.m. and Ethan got up to use the bathroom. He woke me up when he left, so I decided to do something to creep him out. I thought about hiding in the stairwell and jumping out at him when he came out, or pounding on the door to the bathroom since he thought I was still asleep. All of a sudden, the bedroom door opened again. The hallway was so dark I couldn't see him at all, but I heard him walk into our room. Then in the pitch black, I heard him shut our door, walk past me where I was sleeping, and lay down under his covers. I was kind of bummed he came back so soon because I wanted to scare him. So instead, I decided it would be creepy if I just stood up as fast as I could and speed walked out the room. Kind of lame, but we already thought the house was scary, so I thought it might get him. So I did it. I shot up out of bed as fast as possible and quickly ran out the room and shut the door behind me. I was outside our room and consumed in the darkness of the hallway, listening for his reaction. That's when I realized something awful. I was hearing noise, but it wasn't coming from the bedroom. It was coming from right behind me. I turned around and listened. There was someone in my bathroom. I was scared but also confused because Ethan was just in there, so I knocked. "Ethan, is that you?" "Yeah." This is when I came to the horrifying realization that someone else was in the room with me when I ran out. In the pitch black of the hallway, I backed away from the door and told Ethan to come out. I very quietly told him what happened, and we both decided that we had to check the room. We braced ourselves and I slowly opened the door, expecting to see some terrifying figure in his bed. Our room had no ceiling light, so in order to adequately see, I had to walk into the darkness of the room and turn on the floor lamp. After I mustered up the courage, I ran into the room and turned the lamp on. His bed was empty. We searched the room and under our beds but couldn't find anyone, and to this day it still baffles me because I know I was awake to hear everything that occurred. And to make it even creepier, we slept with the windows open that night. We were on the 3rd floor, but someone could have jumped to the thick divider between the house backyards if they wanted to. I made sure the doors are always locked from now on. When I was 13 to 14 years old, I lived in an older house. I shared a room with my foster brother, who was also convinced that there was something strange going on there. For months we would hear breathing or very faint whispers at night as we turned out all the lights to sleep. We decided to move around the beds and TV stand to see if we could hear things wrong. But the first night, and most nights after, I would feel something moving and push against the bottom of my mattress at night. When my foster brother was out the house, I would hear sighs and creaks from under his bed. We were both out the house one day, and when I returned that night, my foster parents told me they thought we were home all day because they heard something slamming stuff around my room, but neither of us had been there until I got back that night. Eventually we all went on vacation, but hours after we left, the house had caught fire with an undetermined source. Apparently that's the 3rd house of theirs that had burnt down. My foster parents were old country-living Christians and really didn't have any baggage. My foster brother and I had played a few horror games on our Xbox, but nothing too chaotic or nightmare-inducing. It was a very spread-out community, and we lived on the other side of the road from a cemetery. I haven't returned to the property since. My dad was out with his girlfriend about 2 hours away from home, and I had the entire house to myself. I wasn't expecting them for at least 4 to 7 hours, when I heard the garage door open. It has a very distinctive sound due to the way it echoes through the kitchen and across the open-plan tiled house. Immediately I heard the clicking of his girlfriend's boots and knew it was her from how short she was compared to the rest of the family. She walked like she had something to prove, something to make up for her height. She was definitely saying something to my dad too as she entered, and I could hear him say something back. Since it was so early for them to be home, I had a feeling something was off. I was already basically done with my shower, so I hopped out and threw a towel on, opening the door and looked down at the hall and across the house for them. I absolutely pulled the horror movie rookie move of investigating in a towel, walked the length of the house and saw the gate outside was still closed, opened the door to the garage and saw it empty, and even did an extra loop to rule out missing something. I was 100% home alone still. This wasn't the first time I'd heard something while being home alone, it was just the most distinct. My whole family has heard the slider doors open. When I went car shopping with my dad, my sister heard the garage door and the door in the house from the garage open. No one came home either then. My dad has seen people on the property at 3 a.m, but they're gone without a trace and too fast for a real criminal to be snooping. The house just makes noises that imitate us and aspects of the home. The walls don't bleed though. That's why we still live there. I'm a 40-year-old male, and this happened when I was 28. Me and my child's mother had just had our first son in Knoxville, Tennessee, and decided to move back here for plain out logistics. All of my family's here. I had no work there, and my family wanted me back. So at the time I had a travel trailer we were living in. So pulling it into town I got pulled over, not having extended mirrors, pulling said trailer. I knew I had a warrant, basically just had to do 20 days. Sorry, all of this does relate to the story. So while I'm in jail, my kid's mother Jessie, and my grandma and her boyfriend and my parents went looking for a house to rent for me and Jessie, as she complained she hated the trailer. Boy oh boy, how she would be eating those words later. At this point I should fill you in on the fact that I'm sensitive. The first memories I've had were of ghosts. Growing up in a horribly haunted house, so in short I can walk in a house and feel if there are spirits. Saying that if I would have looked at the house they got for us, I would have said no way. Now don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for their help, but if they had any idea what was to come, they'd have agreed. Fast forward to my release date, 20 days. So we got dropped off in the neighborhood, as I had a few friends there, and even though we had nothing but a few blankets, decided to stay there that night anyway. So that night we decided for whatever reason to stay in the living room on the back wall across from the picture window, with no curtains. So that whole night I could swear sometimes I was looking at us through the window, but of course no one was there. At this point I already felt that something was off, even just coming up to the house. The way that it looked under that one street lamp on that one part of the street. It was creepy. That darkness that just seemed darker than it should be. Then that omen house feeling, like the house is looking at you type thing. Fast forward, we're there for a month or so, and started getting it together, and started bringing our son, Jason, home with us. Jason was about 10 months old at this point, so the first memorable night we laid Jason down and come back to the living room. It was around 10, and it sounded like Jason started choking, startling, and coughing. Then began screaming his head off. So we brought him out for a little bit, calmed him down, laid him back down, and the same thing happened again. So, of course, we're lost as what's happening. And finally all of us go to bed. And the next night the same thing happens. Guess I should say that the bedroom was a little uncomfortable, but nothing major. I thought it was us just getting used to the new house. His crib was in our old room, and we had no issue while it was in there with him. We had my parents watch him for the weekend, which was the next 2 days after the event. Things were a little bit of a blur as to what the exact time frame is here, but I know it was in the next few days. We went to sleep, I woke up, arms crossed in front of my stomach, and felt like something was sitting on my chest, hands on my mouth. I had never heard of sleep paralysis, but at least in my case, I tried to scream, and if you ever scream with a hand over your mouth, you know the noise it makes. Well, I was making that noise, trying to smack my partner's side to help, because I thought I was going to die. I blacked out, came to it, and Jessie woke up, and I told her what happened. Now she's a believer, otherwise she would have thought I was crazy, and I told her that it felt like something had tried to kill me. Then I explained what happened, and I think neither one of us slept that night. So me and her had the agreement that if she's up she'll check, make sure I don't have a terrified look on my face but not move. Well, the next time it happened, it was the same thing. I woke her up after and we were both freaking out. The order in which things happened are a little blurry, being 12 years ago now, but in one of the episodes, she actually did catch it and successfully got me out of it, gasping for air, cussing and saying, "Screw this, we're moving to the living room." Yep, just like all the ghost shows, we ended up refusing to use our bedrooms. At this point, I filled my parents in on what was going on, since now I figured out that whatever was trying to harm me was doing the same thing to my son. I can't even begin to tell you how we felt once we both realized that. Basically, we were laying our son down with a ghost that had a choking fetish. So we were living in the living room. It's getting cold and you can't keep this house warm. I mean, it's a 700 square foot house that the furnace ran non-stop, and you could actually feel wind go straight through the house no matter how much ceiling I did. I mean, to the tune of a $250 gas bill a month. So we're laying in front of the TV and decided to turn it off. Jessie is already asleep. I turned the TV off and lay there waiting to fall asleep as well. In the corner I see a shape forming. I think I'm tripping. It looks like the Grim Reaper, but there's no such thing. And in the classic cloak and scythe, no less. 8 feet tall, darker than midnight. And after staring at him for a while, I somehow pass out. I wish to note that I never told anyone what I saw. I figured that I'd just be thrown in the loony bin at that point. Fast forward a few more weeks in which I keep seeing things every night there. My partner's also telling me she does as well, so I know it's not just me. But as long as I didn't sleep in that room, I don't have the supposed sleep paralysis episodes, as they only happen there. We're planning on moving but didn't have the money, and just have to endure the hell. You know the funny thing, out of all the things that happened at this house, we never had things thrown at us or moved. So the last night we're there, we're laying in front of the TV. I roll over a little after midnight, tell Jessie I love her, and good night, and I switch the TV off. Then this dark shadow thing is standing in the corner as always, and I can feel its gaze, and can't help but stare, but there's no way this is real, no way. I lay there staring at it for what feels like ages, and then turned the TV back on, and said forget this, and laid back down. I thought my partner was already asleep, I never looked, and literally, when I turned the TV on, she said, "Forget this," out loud. The shadow figure was gone, with the light of course. I kid you not 10 seconds later, then my partner jumps up and says, "Hey, did you see the figure standing in the corner?" At that point it confirmed, it wasn't just me. We throw everything in the car and make a break for it. No way we were going to stay there any longer. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's tales. If of course you did, you can let me know down below. I do appreciate receiving your feedback. A huge thank you as always to my members and patrons. Well, of course subscribers too, for your continued help and support in running the channel. It really does mean a lot. And if you'd like to join this exclusive club for exclusive benefits, you can do that. Link in the description. But for now, it's time for me to sign off. There are more videos on screen now if you want to watch more. So stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.